Bonjour à tous, good morning. This session is going to be in English. I'm very happy to be here. I'm the editor-in-chief of Politico here in France. And so we have three ministers in charge of Europe to talk about this topic this morning. Since we're a little late, I'm going to be quick. The issue this morning is about can Europe find its voice? We're facing lots of huge challenges. We're going to talk about three topics, if you're okay, about competitiveness, about security, and about values. These are three areas we would like to touch upon, and then we'll have a discussion. But first, I'm going to start on competitiveness with the German Minister for Europe. Thank you for being here. And, well, as you know, we are facing lots of big challenges on the economic side. The Draghi report identified all these challenges very clearly, but that was more than a year ago, and it seems that things are not moving so fast. So how do you see these challenges, and do you think that we are ready to take the right measures to accelerate these the reforms that we need in Europe?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and also a warm welcome to my colleagues. I'm very pleased, and I feel also honored to be invited here to the Peace Forum. And second remark, I'm delighted to see a lot of young people, because the future is laying in your hands. And one day, when we will be in Benjamin, also you, when we are on pension, then it's your responsibility to shape and to create this Europe. Because we have only together a chance. And especially looking on the world with all these challenges we have to face. You mentioned the three topics also for our further discussion. They are connected. They are connected. Defense, like all the threat we have to face concerning our democracy, the basic of all, but also looking on our economic future. And, well, he was tough criticized, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, when he said, I think almost 2 years ago, l'Europe peut mourir, elle est mortelle. Elle est mortelle. And he was right. He was right because I'm not fully aware if all the partners in Europe are realizing the challenges we have to face. Looking on the war, which will be deepened perhaps by Benjamin later on, we have in Ukraine. We have China. China not acting fair. And we are interested in good relations with China. But it has to be balanced, and our interests have to be balanced. What I mean, our Foreign Affairs Minister, Johann Wadephul, he postponed now a planned visit to China because he got not the appointments which he wanted to have, or better to say that the Chinese side was, let me say, a little bit reluctant in realizing a political program for a foreign affairs minister. So let me say, it is only a symbol how Europe is treated at the moment from China. Looking on raw earths, raw materials. They are not delivered in a sufficient way. And this, I mean, also with fair trade relations. We are dependent from semiconductors. Semiconductors which are coming from Taiwan. 2/3 of the worldwide needed production of semiconductors is coming from Taiwan. This gives also a certain impact on security questions when I see the appetite of China towards Taiwan. But in this case, we are talking about chips. We are talking about the need for our automotive sector. And this is only one example where we have enormous challenges concerning our competition. We have the competition also, let me say it in a more diplomatic sense, which is tested from the United States. It is not only America first, what Donald Trump is doing. It's America only. This is a difference. And what can be seen also in defense politics with other ideas he presented now recently, but especially it can be observed in trade politics. It is perhaps not a trade war, but it was a trade conflict when Trump announced higher tariffs also for European countries, and countries which wanted not to accept it. Look on Switzerland, not part of European Union, of course, but they have now tariffs from 39%. And 39%, you can be more effective in your production, but 39%, it cannot be any longer solved with prices also, and even not from Swiss companies. So you see how things challenged. And by the way, we have a framework of order, the WTO, but due to our friends in America, I think on the judges, WTO cannot work sufficiently how we desire it. We have the challenges outside European Union, but also inside the European Union. European Union is acting as a single market. And this means we have common rules, common principles, common values. We share these values. This has a huge tradition. And one aspect will perhaps deepened by you. But let me say, it is necessary that we respect also these values. We have countries inside European Union which are testing us. And why I'm mentioning it? Because it costs time. And Europe does not have the time. And we does not have the energy to take care only on ourselves. That means we have to face the real challenges of the world and the real challenges for our economy. We have changes, dramatical changes, looking also on the automotive sector, where we as not only as Germany are asking for a longer transition period of time, respecting the climate goals, and there we have the same objective. But anyway, also this is one aspect where we have to consider that our competitiveness is under a huge pressure. So only I described now the situation, and I'm looking forward to the discussion when we ask also for the solutions.
Many points on what you said. You just said that Europe doesn't have time, but do you think, and I'd like to ask your two colleagues as well, do you think that the European Commission does take into account this sense of urgency?
This is a very good question, because, well, it's now our position of Germany, but I think we are not standing alone. We have to reduce bureaucracy. We have to reduce it because we have only two categories for people who are in work. We have leisure time and labor time, working time. Only these two categories. And when I look on smaller companies, but also the bigger ones, all this bureaucracy has to be handled, and it takes a lot of time, and time is money. So that means we have to reduce bureaucracy, and it's only one aspect, only one point. Otherwise, it would not be sufficient 45 minutes to discuss about it. But I have a certain wish that European Commission will understand it, but also the European Parliament. We had one decision in the last week, you know it very well, and also the excellencies which are joining. I want also to welcome the Polish ambassador who is joining the meeting. So we had one crucial decision in the European Parliament, the so-called omnibus. That means that we wanted to set a point for a huge reduction of bureaucracy, and it failed. Unfortunately, we will take another attempt now in November, mid of November, but we will see. Everybody has to face the responsibility.
Okay. You mentioned China, and I would like to ask your colleagues from Poland and France if they think that our strategy in Europe is tough enough with the Chinese, or should we move to something much tougher than we used to implement so far?
Well, thank you for the question. I absolutely agree that we need to be more assertive. It's quite clear today that China is quite often using the rules that we have set up in the past against us. There needs to be a level playing field. I'm quite sure all of us are open, and our businesses here in Europe are open to competition. But this competition needs to happen with fair rules. And when we see China subsidizing its businesses, basically creating a whole ecosystem that allows those companies to have an unfair advantage, we cannot compete that way. That's quite clear. So I believe we need to be more assertive. I also think that we need to be more united in the EU. I don't think any of the member states can today really face China on its own, especially Poland. So I also think back at home we're disillusioned with this idea that we can actually gain something with China bilaterally. And our thinking today is that we need to use the EU to have a proper policy towards China. There will be a new economic security doctrine coming of the European Commission, and we really have our hopes high. I think we'll continue to have a serious discussion how to deal with China. There were some differences among us. I remember when we were voting on the additional tariffs on Chinese EVs, but we really have to find the right balance. All of us understand that this is a crucial issue today.
But when you see the American president and how they act very quickly, do you think we are too slow in Europe?
Well, if you look at Draghi's report, and we are a year from the publication, and I don't remember the exact percentage, but it's not more than 20% of recommendations. That 11, yeah, okay, so even worse. So you tell me. I mean, I think the answer is quite clear. In general, my position on China is that I don't think it's realistic to expect a complete decoupling from China. We need China on some issues. That's quite clear. But the risking, having more of this economic security approach, absolutely, we need that.
Benjamin Haddad.
First, it's really great to be here, and I welcome my two colleagues and friends to Paris and to this Paris Peace Forum, and actually to my district as well. No, look, Gunther said earlier that all these questions are connected, and we cannot talk about the sovereignty of Europe without talking about the competitiveness of Europe. Because the key issue for us today, in a world that's becoming more conflictual, more tense on a geopolitical standpoint, is to reduce our dependencies and be more able to act autonomously, not without others, not without our allies, for example, but have the ability to write our own history when you think of tech and the role that AI and quantum are already playing, will play tomorrow. And when you look at the impact of the dependency we have on social media and the information space that today is dominated by Chinese or American actors. When you look at defense, of course, where we have been increasing our defense spending quite dramatically, and I think our free countries are good examples of that in the last few years, because we had depended so much on one ally, the United States, for our security. But now the key, of course, is to invest in the cooperation between our defense industry and make sure that we lower redundancies and we are able to act together. And when it comes to economic security, it's absolutely key. I think we're getting out of a form of naivete where the European Union was the last actor that believed in the happy globalization of the 1990s. And of course, I mean, we've benefited a lot from trade, from openness, from interconnections, but we see the way this trade is either being weaponized by other actors. I'm thinking especially of the energy relationship we had with Russia, which was used as a weapon by Russia. Or we see also the fact that sometimes we're not in a level playing field. And the case of China is a very good example. When you have overcapacity in certain sectors, I'm thinking of steel, in areas which have been heavily subsidized by China, then it's only fair for Europeans to say, we want to be able to trade, and completely agree with what Ignacy just said. It's not about decoupling, it's about de-risking, it's about just being on a fair standing. Then we will also protect our industry. And we will also support our own companies so that they can compete on the same kind of level playing field. I think it's really, it's thinking, once again, getting out of this sort of naivete and thinking as a power that is able to defend its own interests. And I think this is what the change of mindset that Europeans are going through. And just on another point, on whether we're quick enough or not, we're not quick enough. We're not. We're in an environment that's accelerating, and we've only implemented about 10% of the Draghi report, which gives, I think, a very precise roadmap of where we need to be in terms of reform, simplification of our norms and bureaucracy, in cutting red tape, support of our ecosystem of innovation, et cetera, and the 10% are basically what we've been doing on the defense industry. And here everyone needs to deliver. Member States, European Commission, and the European Parliament in making sure that it's not about precipitating. I'm not sure we can compare what's being done in the US, but it is about understanding that the world is going faster, and if you don't catch up, then really you run the risk of just letting others write your history instead of you, and becoming more of a passive theater of international relations rather than an actor.
We've been living over the last maybe 30 years on the idea that free trade, globalization, etc., would bring lots of benefits. Would you say that, to be a bit blunt, but would you say that free trade is dead today?
In opposite. I think free trade is more important than ever before. What does that mean? I look on the free trade agreements. If we want really to diversify more from China, not to become independent, that would be naive, but to diversify more, we have a huge interest in realizing the free trade agreements. And no concern, I think not automatically on Mercosur, because I know in France it's a little bit tricky. But I think also on the so-called ASEAN states, we have some free trade agreements with countries of the region. We are negotiating with others. Take Thailand, for example, and well, with other states it's more difficult. But we have a huge interest, and we have also a huge interest as I want to say bigger countries inside of European Union, looking on Poland, looking on France, looking on Germany, because we are really export orientated. For us, free trade agreements, that means to have chances in the world. And we should use these chances. CETA, for example, it's a free trade agreement with Canada. It's a success story. NAFTA is the free trade agreement with Japan. It's a success story. So we have to concentrate more on it. And last remark, we should be also a little bit more carefully as Europeans, because the conditions of free trade agreements today became moving targets. What does I mean? I have a huge understanding for social rights. I have a huge understanding for environmental protection. But when I see that all these things are put on and the barrier is moving ahead, and this makes the things not easier. And now I'm also very diplomatic. So it has as a consequence that states with which we have free trade agreements today would not fulfill the conditions of free trade agreements conditions today. So honestly, we have to cancel it. No, this is a joke. But anyway, it's an enormous chance, only to give you this example, and it's our strength, because we are a united single market. We have to offer something. 450 million consumers. 450 million consumers. It's the biggest market of the world. So let us use it. And so I see the chances are higher than the challenges we have to face. It's okay, we can solve it, it's okay, but we should look in an optimistic sense in the future.
Yes, but you mentioned Mercosur. We're not aligned on the issue of free trade between our nations. What do you think? Okay. How can we be more aligned on this issue?
Well, I'm not 100% sure if we are not aligned. I think all of us appreciate the free trade and the export opportunities free trade agreements give us. There are simply some sensitivities among us, be it Poland or France. And in some agreements, we find that not all the effort has been put to protect those sensitive sectors of the economy. But if you ask us in Poland whether in general we believe in free trade agreements, absolutely. In the past, we have benefited from all the free trade agreements that the EU has negotiated. And this is also the argument that we are making internally. That even more so our frustration with Mercosur, because if this was done right, then we would be very happy to have it. But then we have a very sensitive sector in Poland, and if we go forward with that, I'm just simply afraid that people will blame not only the Polish government, but they will blame the whole European integration process. So it becomes a bigger issue then. But then again, on free trade agreement as such, we completely agree.
Benjamin?
No, I don't have much to add to what Ignacy just said. I think it's clear that we have an opportunity to diversify when you look at the economic pressure we're facing from the US and from China. And the debate these last few days on rare earth materials, for example, show that, once again, it's really critical to be able to diversify these partnerships. The key, and I'm going to repeat myself, is the level playing field, is the idea that if you trade, you want to make sure that you don't start importing products that don't respect the same norms and standards that you have set up for yourself and for your own producers in Europe, because otherwise you're exposing your own sectors. I'm thinking especially of our farmers in this case, which unfortunately have often been in a sort of adjusting variable of some of these trade deals. You're exposing them to unfair competition. So the question is, how do we modernize these trade agreements so that we set up, for example, safeguard clauses that say, well, if you have too much import in one sector that really destabilize a field, you give yourself the ability to stop it. This is what we've asked for the trade agreement with Mercosur. How do you have mirror clauses? And how do you make sure that you can control them? So, for example, one of the debates we've been having at the EU level these last few years is to have a real force of control that says we're going to make sure that we don't import products that don't respect our standards, and we're going to give ourselves the means to be able to verify this. Other countries like China do it, you know? And how do you make sure that when you invest in Europe, you respect the standards? We've had this debate about tech companies for a long time. You know, we've set up for ourselves standards in terms of fighting hate speech, disinformation, interference, manipulation of algorithm on our social media platform. We have foreign tech actors. Of course, they're very present in Europe. But if you want to invest in Europe, you have to respect our rule of law. It's the same principle. It's really articulating, once again, this question of competitiveness and prosperity on one hand, and the question of sovereignty on the other. I don't think they are mutually exclusive. They reinforce each other if we found this right balance.
Let's move to security. A few days ago, the French Army Chief of Staff in front of the Parliament said that we should be prepared for a shock. It's the word that he used, for a shock with Russia in the next 3 to 4 years. First question, do you agree with that? And second question, do you think we are taking the right measures to be ready for this shock with Russia? I'd like to ask the question to the three of you. Who would like to start? Maybe.
Ça, c'est vrai. Well, first point. I'm not quite sure if you really realized, I can only speak now from Germany, I want to speak from Germany. If you really realized the threat of Russia in the past, there were countries which were much more realistic and perhaps not so naive. Because we thought all the time, Russia is more dependent from us, from our economy, than vice versa. This was a mistake. This was a real mistake. Countries like Poland, for example, the Baltics, which had their experiences with the former Soviet Union, they were more realistic. And let me say, Olaf Scholz, former Chancellor of Germany, he said, well, we have the so-called Zeitenwende now with the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. It was not the beginning. The beginning was the annexion of Crimea Island, 2014. But where were the lessons learned for Europe? Of course, there were some reactions concerning sanctions, but that were sanctions which were not really worthy in my eyes, but it's tempi passati. So let me say, first challenge is now to recognize the real threat. We are not living in a war, but we are also not living in a peace. And this has to be realized. That means to be prepared. War has different phases. War is not only boots on the ground. War is also done with cyber attacks towards companies in France, in Germany, in Poland, with disinformation campaigns. War is done when I look on the infrastructure, cables, for example, electricity in the Eastern Sea, when the shadow fleet of Mr. Putin is attacking it. So I could give you different examples. So let me say, we have to be prepared that Putin will not stop with Ukraine if he wins this war. So he will continue in Georgia, he will continue in Moldova, and perhaps also in the Baltics. We moved now a whole brigade from Germany to Lithuania. Brigade, that means, to translate it a little bit, 3,000 till 5,000 soldiers. They are now installed to strengthen the eastern flank of NATO. They are now installed in Lithuania. So today, of course, Germany recognized it. And we are a lot, not only in a financial dimension, to support Ukraine. We are really doing a lot. But I think things changed. It has to be realized. The world is not like in former times where we got a lot of very cheap goods from China, very cheap energy from Russia, and very cheap security from the United States. These times are over.
This world is over, yeah. On the other hand, Poland probably understands the threat better than anyone else, no, Ignacy?
Well, right now we are spending close to 5% of our GDP on defense, and that's quite a lot. We're at the very top when it comes to EU states. Answering your question, I think it's good that army generals share their views with the general public, even though the general public might find it sometimes shocking. And I'll tell you a story. Our prime minister told all his ministers to go and do this defense training. And I had this defense training for 2 days. And one of the generals told us, or made us aware, that even in Poland, we got so used to the situation with war happening in Ukraine that to some extent we normalized it. It's not like it was during the first day of Russian invasion of Ukraine, when all of us were thinking about our own safety. So we normalized the situation. We somehow know that, yes, there is a risk, but we don't see it as an immediate risk. And this is a very bad situation, because what Russia is doing, they pose maybe not an immediate threat to us, but possibly a very real threat in the near future. And what we've seen with situations like drone incursions in Poland, but also drone incursions in Denmark, just ahead of the informal European summit, Russia is testing us. And we need to be prepared. So when I hear generals delivering such words, actually I think that's good. We need to realize where we are, and we need to take this threat seriously. And I fully agree with Gunther's, what Gunther said. This is not only about hard security, although it's super important, it's also about societal resilience. And I'll be speaking about that later. But there's something to be done by each of us. Not only governments, but all of us need to be prepared. When it comes to defense, hard defense, I think we need to realize that today we are in a situation where Europe needs to take more responsibility. Europe needs to be able to defend itself. Actually, it is something that the US has been asking us for quite a long time. And we need to deliver, we need to be able, also with our defense industrial base, to deliver, to be able to defend ourselves.
Benjamin Haddad, yeah.
It's clear that we're getting out of a form of denial of the existence of war and conflict, including in Europe. And some more than others, because countries like Poland, who are in the front line in front of the Russian threat, had been warning Europeans for a long time about the nature of the regime in the Kremlin. But I would go even further than that. You know, there's an expression I don't like, is when people say war is back on the European continent. But the truth is it never left. We had the Cold War, which de facto left tens of millions of Europeans behind the Iron Curtain under Soviet totalitarianism. And then 30 years ago, and this is something that actually is at the center of this Paris Peace Forum, we had a war in the Western Balkans. You know, in my office, I don't have a lot of personal stuff in my office because it's not a very stable job, so you shouldn't get too attached. But I do have a poster that I bought in Sarajevo a few years ago, and it's from 1995, when we had a genocide at the time in Srebrenica. It's closer to Paris than Kiev is. And it says, Europe, wake all Sarajevo is calling you, and shows Europe as a woman who's asleep. And at the time already, we needed the Americans to intervene because we were unable at the European level to do it. And second, there was a form of thinking in Europe that this was anachronistic. And it was all the hatreds, all the ethnic hatreds is coming back. And then in 2008, we had Georgia. And then in 2014, we had Crimea. And then now we have the large-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So we are getting out of this denial, and it's happening at the same time where the United States is basically telling us you need to take more ownership over security and defense. China is our priority, and this is not Trump telling us. This was already Barack Obama with the pivot to Asia. And so these are the conclusions we need to draw. The paradox for us, and I'm going back to the European Union being a project of the happy globalization, is that our European Union is an incredibly successful peace project. And it's one of the greatest political adventure in history. And it's successful on our soil. It's replaced centuries of conflict and war by cooperation based on market and on the rule of law. But this is not necessarily preparing us well for a world that is still, and more actually, about zero-sum game approach and conflict and geopolitical competition. And so we have to have the two parts of the brain. What makes our European Union successful, but also being prepared to defend it, to defend our values and defend our interests, and with countries that have decided that we're their enemies.
How confident are you, the three of you, on the strength of NATO's Article 5?
Very confident. Seriously. Yeah, I mean, with all the discussions that we have with our US colleagues and all the differences, actually President Trump has been crystal clear on Article 5. So I'm dead serious when I say we are very confident.
I have also no doubts, but I only want to remember that we have not only Article 5, we have also Article 42.7. And this is not less worthy. So we should never forget that we have also a solidarity in security. And this solidarity in security and this kind of security is given by the European treaties.
I'm convinced that it would be disastrous for US interest if tomorrow you had an Article 5 type incident and the US would not react on it. I think it would send a message of weakness to the rest of the world, to areas. I just said that China is the big priority for the US. And what kind of message it would send to China, to Iran, to other regional and global competitors to the US. But the second thing I would like to say about this is that it also depends on us Europeans. If you show within the European pillar of NATO that Europeans are strong allies, that they're self-reliant, that they also bring something to the table, then this is also something that brings back the US in the alliance. This is why, we had a debate the last few years about the French term where we like concepts. The French concept, strategic autonomy. And when I would go sometimes to Germany and Poland, I would have my friends say, you want to do strategic autonomy against the US? No, not at all. I'm absolutely convinced that this is also the way to reshape in a more mature, balanced way, a more modern way, the transatlantic relationship. If you have Europeans that are more autonomous and can act on their own, this is also what tells Americans we are worthy allies, and it's in your interest also to work with Europeans.
But does strategic autonomy means we would need a form of a sort of a European NATO? Would it make sense?
Not necessarily. I think we have, as Gunther said, we have the Article 42.7 in the Lisbon Treaty, so we already have a defense and security clause within the European Union. The question now is, A, capacities. So let's make sure that we put the resources to build up a European defense industrial base. This is what we're doing through, for example, the European Commission funding, the SAFE program, 150 billion euros that was just announced to make sure that countries can cooperate together on a concrete project. And the second thing we need is to act, to do things. And one example of this, and this is not through the EU per se, but it's European countries working together, is the coalition of the willing on Ukraine. Look at what we've done, by the way, with the UK, because we do need to work with the UK, which is a major European, not EU, but European strategic actor here, is to say what's happening in Ukraine is our security. So first, let's increase the pressure on Russia, and that's what we're doing with the US right now with the renewed sanctions on energy. Let's increase the pressure on the Kremlin so that we put back the Russians around the negotiation table, continue also our military support to Ukraine. But if tomorrow you have a ceasefire, how do you make sure that it's not just a break that Russia uses to rearm and then to reattack Ukraine? The recent past, shows that that's what's most likely to happen. There won't be eternal peace anymore. It will be about deterrence and showing strength. And this will be our responsibility as Europeans, to continue to support the Ukrainian army and have a robust and strong Ukrainian army, but also to think about the role that we Europeans, maybe through the deployment of contingents on the ground, we will have to play in these security guarantees. This is a concrete example of Europeans taking ownership of their own security, and also in partnership, of course, with the US.
Would you be confident in Poland and in Germany on stricter rules for European procurement of armament?
I'm not sure.
To raise the share of European procurement.
Well, we already have some rules on that in SAFE or EDIP. I think we need to strike a right balance. I'm very much in favor of us building a true industrial defense base here in Europe. And just in some cases, we simply need to buy something here and now, and it's simply not available in Europe. So then it's really about building our capacity immediately. But the general approach is quite clear. If we want to be able to defend ourselves, we need to be able to produce it here as well.
Can only underline and emphasize what Ignacy said. Of course, also in NATO, we have one market. We have to share our interests also when we buy, of course, our defense products. But I wanted to emphasize also one very important point which Benjamin made. Ukraine does not only need any kind of peace. Ukraine needs security. This makes a difference. Because when it's what we say in German, Diktatfrieden, if it is only a dictated peace, it will never be accepted by Ukraine themselves. They made their experience with old Soviet Union before. We should not forget we had the Holodomor. Holodomor, it was a hunger crisis in the 30s of the last centuries. The figures are different, but they, one hand says 3 million dead people, others say 7 million killed people, only because Stalin isolated the region, and a lot of people had to die due to the hunger. So each child in Ukraine knows it. So let me say, if it is only a kind of peace, a dictated peace, it will not be accepted by Ukrainians themselves, and they will go out of the country, because they don't think that this kind of peace will have any sustainability. And they need security and stability, and this has to be granted finally also by Europe. We have to be aware about this development.
Ignacy, would you say that our democratic values are under attack from Russia or others?
Well, absolutely. But I also want to finish on a more positive note. If you allow us, I see that we only have 4 minutes. And our meeting here reminded me of the visit of our bosses in Moldova. So back in August, Chancellor Merz, President Macron, and Prime Minister Donald Tusk visited Moldova for its Independence Day to show that that we see Moldova as part of the European family. So, and I'm talking about this to remind us that Europe still has this power to attract. And when we use this power right, we can win. And I would also love to remind all of us that Europe still is the best place to live in the world. We've complained a lot today, but let's also realize that we still live in probably the best places in the world. I mean, Paris, come on, we all know this is one of the best places in the world.
Because of the values, because of the rule of law,
that's exactly
like
what
that.
I'm. Well, because of the values, because of democracy, because of rule of law, because of human rights, because of culture, those are all very important things. And yes, they are under threat today, not only from Russia, but some global developments have made this a bit more difficult for us. And I think we really need today in the EU to have a strategy and to have proper tools to support civil society organizations, to support civic education and media literacy, to have independent media all around Europe. We need to realize the role that algorithmic content selection plays in democracy. We need to realize what is the role, both negative and positive, of social media platforms. And you probably don't know that, but we do have a cooperation in the Weimar Triangle, so-called digital Weimar Triangle. Yeah. And I think it's a very good one, and we really need that for the future. To also finish with a positive note, I'm very excited, and I actually wanted to thank all of you for coming here. I see so many young faces, and there's just one key message I would like to deliver. Become involved with politics, become involved with public things. If you don't do it, others will do it for you. So truly, the future lies in your hands. And my message to all the young people, really stand up and fight for the world that you would like to see. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe one last word on the threat from Russia, on cyber threats, because we've seen that in France a lot, and it's very hard to respond to that, I believe, without and at the same time keep our values. So how can we do that?
If you allow me, I'm actually going to do the same thing as Ignacy and end on a more positive note, because I was as well very moved by this visit to Moldova, and then by the results where we saw that you had a pro-European majority in Moldova and supporting the courageous government of Maia Sandu, and the reform track that the country is taking is going to be demanding and long. It's about having the rule of law, independence of the judiciary, protection of minorities, etc., but we're there to accompany them. And the reason I want to mention this is because when we have doubts about your European projects, it's good to look at candidate countries. It's good to look at kids in Ukraine dying in 2014 on the Maidan with the European flag, because for them it's the promise of a better future. The same year in 2014, we in France, we were putting the National Front ahead in the first time for an election during the European election. And you had kids dying because they wanted to be part of Europe. And by the way, not even part of the European Union, just for a free trade agreement at the time with the European Union. You have countries in the Western Balkans, you have Moldova, you have the kids on the street also in Georgia who are protesting for the European ideal. I think it brings a lot of inspiration, and sometimes you see that the soul and the spirit of Europe is not so much in the bureaucratic hallways of Brussels, but in these candidate countries, and that should give us also some hope in our project. And one last word, because as Ignacy said, we were maybe pessimistic or negative, because the truth is it's harder to be pro-European than anti-European. You know why? Because when you're anti-European, you're just against it. When you're pro-European, that doesn't mean you have to say that everything that the European Union does works out. You can be demanding, you can want to transform and reform and push Europe to be much more efficient, competitive, to upgrade its ambition on defense, because you feel that we're stronger at 27 than we will be isolated and alone between the United States, China, and against the Russian threat. So of course it's always more difficult in the public debate, but I think clearly, once again, this is a project of hope and inspiration, and this will be our shield in the world that's coming.
Thank you all for coming to the Paris Peace Forum.